Now, what else we're going to talk about today is going to be an amazing show, and I'm glad that all of you could make it. We're going to talk about King Solomon's command to cut into pieces. And we're going to understand what that really means. We're also going to look at Solomon's temple. We're going to take a look at this temple, and what you're looking at with these cherubim standing side by side is the Holy of Holies, which is 20 cubits by 20 cubits by 20 cubits. The cube, 8,000 square cubits, laden in gold. And this was the Holy of Holies where God dwelled on earth. And you're wondering, why is it a cube? And we're going to get into why that is. Okay, everything God does, it is good. The devil has an evil counterpart. But to start the show out today, we're going to talk about Alice in Wonderland syndrome. Now, this was a shocker, and we're going to go over some very bizarre findings. See, science is a master at compartmentalizing information across different specialties, compartmentalizing, trapping information in silos so that you never look across to the next silo to put the pieces together. And we, I believe, today are going to be able to put some of the pieces together because we know how to think laterally. We know how to think outside the silo. That's where the truth lies. The deception lies in division, in compartmentalization. The truth lies in lateral thinking. Now, what is Alice in Wonderland syndrome? It is a shift in depth perception. It is a shift in your perception of your reality, and this is very real. And as I shared with you guys, both my son and I experienced this shift in reality at roughly the same age. I think I was a teenager, and as was he, early teens. It seemed to coincide with puberty. But we're going to get into some of these studies. Now, there's going to be a lot of scientific information. I'm going to do my best to try to paraphrase this for you guys so that we can have a more accurate understanding of what this might mean. But here's the exciting information. As you know, your pineal gland regulates melatonin in your brain. And I believe we found a direct link to Alice in Wonderland syndrome in the pineal gland. And that to me is exciting because it is a shift in your perception. Now, some people have associated this with out-of-body experiences. And I've never had an out-of-body experience per se, but I have had maybe some of the precursors to that, which is like an Alice in Wonderland syndrome. So what is Alice in Wonderland syndrome? Well, again, it's a shift in your depth perception. It's usually accompanied with some kind of state of illness, brain injury, which is some of the things we're going to cover today, and or there is no explanation for it in 50% of cases. And what happens is you're in this sleepful state, about to go to bed, lights are out, you look across the room, and the dot, the little red power dot on the VCR or the whatever, all of a sudden looks like it's really far away, like twice as far, or 3 times as far away. Or when you look at the light switch in the dark, it looks really far away. And you feel really big. And then to test it, you can actually stick your hand out in front of your face, and it looks really far away. So it is something going on in the brain. Now, this particular author talks about it. It says, a few months ago, my 10-year-old daughter, Paulina, was suffering from a bad headache right before bedtime. She went to lie down, and I sat beside her, stroking her head. After a few moments, she looked up at me and said, everything in the room looks really small. And I suddenly remembered, when I was young, I too would see things far away. So this is a case of a hereditary experience of Alice in Wonderland syndrome, which is what my son and I both had. And it looks as if everything in the room was on the wrong end of a telescope. And that's exactly what it looks like. I asked Pauline if it was the first time she'd experienced such a thing. She shook her head and said it happened every now and then. When I was a little girl, I told her it would happen to me, and I had a fever or was nervous. I told her not to worry and that it would go away on its own. Soon as she fell asleep, and I ran straight to my computer. Within minutes, I discovered there was an actual name for what turns out to be a very rare affliction, Alice in Wonderland syndrome. The actual condition is called micropsia. Micropsia. Objects appear small. Some sufferers perceive their own body parts to be larger or smaller. So this goes on in this article. They're associating with epilepsy and stroke, but oftentimes there is no explanation for it. It's not really a hallucination, as she points out here. It's more of a shift in your perception of the reality. So this goes on, and they talk about abnormal flow, blood flow in the parts of the brain that control vision and process texture, shape, and size. We're going to get into that, the parietal lobe. We're going to look at some studies on blood flow in the parietal lobe, where this is probably occurring. The brain of someone with Alice in Wonderland syndrome is just a little bit different from those with other auras, they're calling it. So this goes on, and some people have it associated with migraines. And let's see what else here. Let's go back in the chat, check in on you guys. Whoops. Make sure let me drag this over here. Glad you guys can make it. Again, this will be uploaded later if you guys are going back and forth following the riots. I see K Small in the house. Thanks, girl. Okay, so let's continue on with this. Now, I pulled up this study. This is called melatonin signal transduction and mechanism of action in the central nervous system, using the rabbit cortex as a model. So what they did is they looked at the parietal lobe, the parietal cortex of a rabbit. Now, what is the parietal cortex? This is the parietal lobe right here. It's this part of the brain that's lit up right here. Let's look at this. This is the parietal cortex. And the parietal cortex is basically controlling your motor controls, depth perception, visual input, the where. It's looking at the where, spatial relationships of objects. So this is the area that's affected during Alice in Wonderland syndrome. So this is what we're going to focus on today. This is it. This is the parietal lobe, back center of your brain. And let's see here. Let's see if they talk about the function here. Plays an important role in the integrating sensory information, which is your sight, from various parts of your body. Now, some people have explained that they're also getting audible changes when they're going through this experience. There's a buzz that occurs in their ears. It says here, information from various parts of the body, knowledge of numbers and their relations, and the manipulation of objects. Its function also includes processing information relating to the sense of touch. Portions of the parietal lobe are involved with visuospatial processing. This is what we're going to focus on. That is what is being affected. Although multisensory in nature, the posterior parietal cortex is often referred to by vision scientists as the dorsal stream of vision. We're going to look at that. The dorsal stream of vision. It is the where of the vision, not the how. Visuospatial. Vision in space. Now, this is interesting because there's a lot of talk about the veil, right? The veil of reality and what we perceive in the material realm versus the spiritual realm. So they looked at this cortex of the rabbit. They looked at the parietal lobe in relation to melatonin. Now, melatonin is the chemical that's produced in your pineal gland when the lights go out. We're going to talk about how that works. When the lights go out, melatonin is released. It makes you sleepy. You fall asleep. That's the cycle. And it says here in this study, undoubtedly the binding site in the rabbit parietal cortex possesses all of the characteristics of a functional receptor. We suggest that melatonin is involved in the control of fundamental cortical functions, and that it acts in concert with this other chemical called GABA one of the two major inhibitory neurotransmitters in the central nervous system. So it's saying that there are receptors in the parietal cortex, the area that handles depth perception in space. There are melatonin receptors. What that means is it's linking it directly back to your pineal gland. And this is why I know for me, I would experience this when the lights were out right before bedtime. There was a shift in my spatial reality. Now, let's continue on here because this gets even more interesting. There are two streams, the ventral stream and the dorsal stream. The dorsal stream seems to be responsible in somehow transmitting this melatonin into these receptors that are in the parietal lobe. It says here the dorsal stream is proposed to be involved in the guidance of actions and recognizing where objects are in space. We talked about that. General features: the dorsal stream is involved in spatial awareness and guidance of actions. The dorsal stream commences with purely visual functions in the occipital lobe before gradually transferring to spatial awareness. Effects of damage or lesions. Damage to the posterior parietal cortex causes a number of spatial disorders, including simultanagnosia, where the patient can only describe single objects without the ability to perceive it as a component of a set of details. Wow. Cannot see the forest from the trees. Is this starting to sound familiar? But obviously there was no damage in my brain or my son's brain or many of the other people's brains, unless our brains are a little bit different. This is where the patient can use visuospatial information to guide arm movements, can't use visuospatial information. All of these are related to depth perception. Now, here it talks about the dorsal stream and melatonin. Let's scroll down here. It says a contingent of GCs is directed to hypothalamus, specifically to the suprachiasmatic nucleus, dorsally to the optic chiasma. Remember we talked about the optic chiasm, you guys? The cross. Well, the suprachiasmatic nucleus has a very specific function. It actually detects light coming in through your eyes. This is the suprachiasmatic nucleus. Here, let's do a close-up of this. Here. This is your suprachiasmatic nucleus. It receives light from your eyes. Let's read about it. Most human bodily functions and behaviors are not steady state. Instead, they fluctuate in 24-hour cycles, such as the sleeping and waking cycles and cycles of body temperature, hunger, and secretion of various hormones. The central clock regulates all of these circadian cycles, is located in two tiny structures in the brain, the base of the left and right hypothalamus. Each of these structures is no longer than a pencil tip, contains several tens of thousands of neurons. These structures are called suprachiasmatic nuclei, because they're located above the optic chiasma, where the left and right optic nerves cross paths. Optic nerves coming out of the back of your eyes, crossing in the middle. We talked about how that is an analogy of the crucifixion of Christ, the cross. Two eyes are the two thieves that try to steal your salvation. The eyes of good and evil, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Here's the suprachiasmatic nuclei. It says this strategic position enables the suprachiasmatic nuclei to receive projections from the optic nerve that tell them the intensity of the ambient light entering your eyes. This information is then sent to the pineal gland so it knows how much melatonin to release to make you sleepy and go to sleep. It says the neurons of these nuclei use this information to resynchronize themselves with daylight every day. Now, I believe that the melatonin and serotonin in your pineal is the milk and honey, the land of milk and honey. It says here, Fluctuations of the human circadian cycle persist even when individuals are cut off from the light of day. In experiments where the suprachiasmatic nuclei were destroyed in animals such as hamsters, their cyclical behavior, such as their sleep-wake cycles, become completely disorganized. And when suprachiasmatic nuclei were then transplanted from hamster fetuses into other animals, their biological rhythms returned. These findings indicate that the mammalian biological clock mechanism is, in fact, not only endogenous, but also of genetic origin. This is your clock. Light coming in through your eyes dictates your circadian rhythm. Melatonin. The hormone secreted by the pineal gland was not discovered until the 1950s. Its role in regulating biological rhythms was then uncovered only gradually, making the pineal gland the last of the endocrine glands to have its function identified. The light coming in through your eyes hits the suprachiasmatic nuclei, which then transfers the information to your pineal gland. Now, what's the pathway for this? Well, they're saying here that the pathway goes all the way down here through your central nervous system and then comes back up to the pineal gland. And I'm starting to wonder, is this suprachiasmatic nuclei following a different path? Is it following this path, or is it projecting onto the pineal gland? Let's look at some other studies about this, because this goes deep, you guys. Let's see, where are we at here? It says here, the visual system projects to the pineal gland, which itself produces melatonin. Here it talks a little bit more about the suprachiasmatic nuclei. The clock that controls the circadian rhythm in all mammals is located in a specific nucleus of the hypothalamus called the suprachiasmatic nuclei. If this nucleus is damaged, animals lose their ability, lose regular rhythms, and fall asleep or wake up at rather random times over the 24-hour day. It says another structure that contributes to the daily rhythm of sleep and arousal is the pineal gland. Structure resides in the middle of your brain. This is what we just talked about. Shows here, under the control of the suprachiasmatic nuclei, the pineal gland releases melatonin at night. Melatonin is released, and look where it goes. It goes up into this dorsal area of the parietal lobe. Now you're starting to see the picture. This Alice in Wonderland syndrome seems to be affected by the melatonin from your pineal gland. Is it true that maybe those of us that were maybe predestined to wake up have slightly different brains? Here's a functional MRI of a child with Alice in Wonderland syndrome during an episode of micropsia. Background: Alice in Wonderland syndrome is a perceptual disorder involving brief transient episodes of visual distortions and can occur in conjunction with certain viral infections. It can, but not always. Hence, we just demonstrated that this definitely looks hereditary. You can't have a father and son or a mother and daughter who had the very same viral infection in the very same year of their life. It doesn't work that way. But science is going to try to make you think that that's what's causing it, because they're trying to hide something. Here are the results of this study. In both tasks, the child with Alice in Wonderland syndrome showed a reduced activation in primary and extraciate visual cortical regions, but increased activation in parietal lobe cortical regions. So their parietal lobe, which we were saying, had increased activation. This was in viral onset Alice in Wonderland syndrome. So this one was caused by a virus. But they're saying the parietal lobe, which was what we determined, is the area of the brain where all the activity was going on while this child was experiencing this. What else do we have pulled up here for you guys? I thought I had one more study. So I thought I would present this to you guys. This is very interesting information because there's something that they're not telling us. All right, let's continue on with Solomon. Now, many of you heard on Real Talk Live the other night, Dabu had brought up Solomon, and he was talking about some of these findings, demons of Goetia and things like that. I thought that was really interesting. I then compared the 72 demons of the Goetia to the 722 demons of Pokemon. And that video is going viral. My Pokemon video is going viral. But I mean, even when you slap people in the face with the truth, they're going to be in denial. I got weirdos coming on there saying, long live Pikachu and all this. And they call us weird while they worship demons. Anyway, W brought up some good points, and everything that he said is included in the Testament of Solomon. They talk about all this. They talk about the genie in the bottle. They talk about him wielding the the control, this ring. He was like the Lord of the Rings. He had this ring and with the Star of David on it, and he could bottle up these demons. I'm going to put a link to this in the description box. Now, this Testament of Solomon is not in the Bible, but its authenticity cannot be confirmed nor denied. So that's up to each and every one of you to decide whether or not this is authentic to you. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I could go back to, I think this was dated back to first millennium, Christ era. So when Christ walked, just before Christ walked the earth, I believe this was written. So I'm not going to tell you that I know for a fact that this is not true. So I decided to go to the Bible itself and look at what we do have that we know has at least been canonized in the Bible. Okay. Now, who was Solomon? For those of you that don't know, Solomon was in the bloodline of Christ. He was the forefather of Christ himself. And I found some interesting findings because I wanted to know who this person Solomon was. Now, it is possible. It is accepted knowledge that Solomon did disappoint God. That's mentioned in the Old Testament, in the Chronicles, in the Kings. That he had wives that led him into idolatry later on in his life. But early in his life, he served the Lord. He had a form of Freemasonry. At least Masonic rituals refer to King Solomon in the building of his temple. And all of these Masonic temples are fashioned after King Solomon's temple. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the original Masonry was bad. We know the current form is bad because these people build and destroy, and they create order out of chaos. We know that. But as we know, for everything good that God does, the devil will come up with a counterpart that is evil. So could that be what's going on here? I don't know. I'm throwing it out there. Why does the word soul sound like the Spanish word for soul, which is the sun? S-O-L is Spanish for the sun, and S-O-U-L is the soul. These were some things that came to mind today, this morning. And it's up to each and every one of you to pray to the Holy Spirit to find the bottom, to get to the bottom of this. I'm just going to present to you some facts, some information, some things to ponder. Solomon, does that mean man of the sun? I don't know. And is the sun, does that play any part to the story of Solomon? Was this his real Hebrew name? Was this his original name, or was this a name given to him? Just like Jesus Christ. Jesus meaning Zeus. But yet we know that Jesus was not the sun in the sky. We know he didn't worship the sun. He worshiped his Father in heaven. These are questions you need to ask yourself. I don't know what the original Hebrew name of Solomon was, or if this was a given name to him. I don't know. But these, we can never throw the baby out with the bathwater. We got to think critically, and we have to allow the Holy Spirit to lead us into all truth, right? So that's the story of Solomon. So let me pull up my notes here. So I'm looking at this. I'm reading in the scriptures where David reigned over Israel for 40 years just before Solomon became king. David was Solomon's father. And David reigned 7 years in Hebron and 33 years in Jerusalem. Guess what? There's your 7337. And there's your 33 degrees of Freemasonry. 33 years. Now, what is the 37? And hold on to your chairs for this, because we've talked about this on this channel, this 3773 cube star matrix. Now, how did King David know about this? How did he know that you could take 72 points, 73 points, 73 dots, and make them, and they would fit into a star pattern? And how did he know that you could take 37 dots, which is the opposite of 73, and fit that into a cube pattern? Remember, oops. He reigned 7 years and 33 years. Right? That's 40 total years. 7 and 33. And this image is found during the reign of David and Solomon. Artifacts were found with this symbol on them. Let's do it. Let's do a search on that so I can show you. Star of David artifacts. Get some of them. Now, in order to get to the bottom of some of this, we got to be honest with ourselves. We can't shy away from topics that may be uncomfortable, or we don't want to not open doors because we think we're not going to find the answers that we don't want to see. Okay? And that's why I think you guys come here, because I'm fearless in finding the truth. Okay? No matter where that truth leads us. Now, this is interesting because here they talk about many ancient artifacts. Let's see here. It says archaeologists have not found yet in their excavations the shield used by King David in his wars. So we do not know if this shield was in the form of a Star of David, or if there had been a Star of David carved on it. They also did not find the seal of Solomon. So it is likely that they will have to wait under the control of demons till the Messiah comes, instead of the demons being under our control. What is this talking about? I don't know. But they are saying here in the Testament of Solomon that this Star of David was on this ring that he used to control the demons. Again, take it or leave it in terms of the authenticity of this book. But they were talking about this ring that he had. All right, so let's move on from that and look at some of these artifacts that were found. Messianic seal was found etched or inscribed on eight ancient artifacts. Here it is here. Here's an ancient artifact here with the seal of David on it. Now, you're probably wondering where I stand with this. Okay? My gut feeling, and again, this is just my opinion, is that this cube star matrix represents the whole of God and earth, the original plan. The devil has taken the cube. He's made a black cube out of it, which is his cube, because I'm going to show you how Solomon's temple also had a cube. And God agreed that he would reside in this cube, the Holy of Holies, the golden cube. But wouldn't it make sense that the devil would try to take his cube, which is on the North Pole of Saturn, and like take command over it? And this is the realm we were living in because God says that Satan is the ruler of this world. We saw in the movie Star Trek a symbol with just this pyramid and a cube in it. That's the below, God on earth, Illuminati, getting rid of the above, which is God. They just want everyone in the material realm down here. Okay? So we work in cubicles, right? We're trapped in this matrix here. This is my guess. Why? Jesus referenced Solomon directly. He walked on Solomon's porch. Let's go and take a look at that. He actually talked about Solomon, his forefather. Let's take a look. Jesus, Solomon. Actually, we're going to do this. www.biblegateway.com. So it's hard for me to believe. I mean, if you believe that Solomon was evil and the mechanism of control has come down through the ages, and that, you know, Solomon was bad, and that then you have to throw out Jesus too. And I don't think that that's what's going on here. I know that's not what's going on here, because Jesus is the Savior. Okay. But like here, in Luke, Jesus is talking. And he says, consider the lilies, how they grow. They toil not, they spin not. And yet I say unto you that Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. Okay. So Jesus is speaking in terms of endearment here toward his forefather Solomon, not as someone who was evil. Here, another reference. The queen of the south shall raise up in the judgment with the men of this generation, condemn them. For she came from the utmost parts of the earth to hear the wisdom of Solomon. Talking about the queen of Sheba here is who they're referencing. And behold, a greater than Solomon is here. So Jesus is talking about the wisdom of Solomon. We're going to get into that too. So I can't believe that Solomon was a bad person. Otherwise, Jesus would have balanced these praises with criticism about his forefather, right? And this is what makes me tend to want to doubt these kinds of references to Solomon in the Testament of Solomon. Maybe there are logical explanations for these references, and I have not even gone into them to decode and see if they're reading between the lines to see if, in fact, some of this can jive. They're saying here that he used demons to build the temple, God's temple. I just can't believe that to be the case. Unless they might have been angels and they're just calling them demons. You know, like this is not jiving with this. Hope you guys can see my point with that. Let's go back in the chat, check in on you guys. We're just trying to get to the bottom of this. We're just looking at all the information. Yes, Matrix Ministries. He eventually chose Satan over God. We do know that. And I opened the program talking about that. All right, let's keep going with this, you guys, because I think we're getting close to finding some answers. So we talked about the 33. So this is probably where the Freemasonry, 33 degrees of Freemasonry comes from. David's 33 years of reign in Jerusalem. So Solomon set up upon the throne of his father David, and his kingdom was firmly established. And it does say that Hiram was hired by Solomon to build the temple. Now the Freemasons have a character called Hiram Abiff. But obviously they do some very bizarre types of rituals. And what do you call it? Hazing and things like that. Blindfolding people, and that's not biblical. Which tells me the modern Freemasonry is a knockoff. It's an evil knockoff. of the original. Okay. It says here, the house was built of stone. These are all scriptures. You can look these up. Prepared at a quarry, so that neither hammer nor axe nor any tool of iron was heard in the house while it was being built. This is pretty amazing, because to me, this suggests that the temple of God was built miraculously. I mean, how could you not hear any hammer, axe, or tool of iron? How did they move these large stones from the quarry? How did they place them if no sounds were heard when they were being placed? Now, this is the inner sanctuary. This is the picture I showed you here. And the inner sanctuary was a cube. Here's the scriptural backing for that. 20 cubits by 20 cubits, overlaid with pure gold, the golden cube. Here's the porch, pillars with a length of 50 cubits and a breadth of 30 cubits. There was a porch in front with pillars and a canopy in front of them. Now, what is this porch of King Solomon's temple? The porch is the same porch that Jesus walked upon. Let's read the account. I believe these were like the Pharisees. Let's just read it from the beginning here. Or let's see. Verily, verily, I say unto you, he that entereth not by the door into the sheepfold, but climbeth up some other way, the same is a thief and a robber. Wow. This is powerful. Remember we talked about how to find Christ? There's shortcuts, and there are the right way. And it's saying here that it's this, if you take the shortcut, the same as a thief is as a thief and a robber. These are Jesus' words. But he that entereth in by the door is the shepherd of the sheep. To him the porter openeth, and the sheep hear his voice, and he calleth his own sheep by name, and leadeth them out. And when he putteth forth his own sheep, he goeth before them, and the sheep follow him, for they know his voice. He's talking about the sheep. And a stranger will they not follow, but they will flee from him, for they know not the voice of strangers. So the word only resonates with people who know who the voice is. This parable spake Jesus unto them, but they understood not what things they were which he spake to them. So basically, these people weren't understanding Jesus' parable. Then said Jesus unto them, verily I say unto you, I am the door of the sheep. All that ever came before me are thieves and robbers. But the sheep did not hear them. I am the door. By me, if any man enter in, he shall be saved, and shall go in and out and find pasture. So he is the only way to the Father, the only door. The thief cometh not, but for to steal and kill and to destroy. I have come that they might have life, and they might have it more abundantly. You see, I am the good shepherd, and the good shepherd giveth his life for his sheep, which is exactly what he would do. But he that is in hireling, that's interesting, and not the shepherd, whose own the sheep are not, seeth the wolf coming, and leaveth the sheep, and flee, and the wolf catcheth them, and scatters the sheep. The hireling fleeth because he is an hireling, and careth not for the sheep. We were just talking about how Solomon hired Hiram to build the temple. I am the good shepherd, and I know my sheep, and I am known of mine. So we recognize his voice. As the Father knoweth me, even so know I the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. And other sheep I have, which are not of this fold, them also I must bring, and they shall hear my voice. And there shall be one fold and one shepherd. Therefore doeth my Father love me, because I lay down my life, that I might take it again. No man taketh it from me, but I lay it down myself. I have power to lay it down, I have power to take it again. This commandment I have received of my Father. It's talking about the sacrifice to come. There was a division, therefore, again among the Jews for these sayings. So the Jews were mad at Jesus. And many of them said, he hath a devil and is mad. So they're accusing him of being possessed by a devil. They're like, you're going to save us? Others said, these are not the words of him that hath the devil. Can a devil open the eyes of the blind? So some people defended him and said, he's doing miracles to heal the blind. How can he have the devil in him? And it was at Jerusalem, the Feast of Dedication, and it was winter. And Jesus walked in the temple in Solomon's porch. Now watch this, because this is amazing. And you're never going to hear this spoken about in a church, because we're comparing numbers. Remember, God knows the beginning from the end. I know some of you have come forward and said, well, the Bible wasn't even made into chapters until such and such year. I get that. But God's amazing, and he knows the beginning from the end. He knows that Isaiah was going to be chapter 53, comparing to this porch that was 50 by 30, 5, 3. Why? Because Isaiah 53 talks about Jesus, the prophet that came before him. And who was Jesus talking about? The people that came before him. What does Isaiah 53 say? It says, who hath believed our report, and to whom is the arm of the Lord revealed? For he shall grow up before him as a tender plant, and as a root out of the dry ground. He hath no form or comeliness, and when we shall see him, there is no beauty that we should desire him. He is despised and rejected of men. This is exactly what Jesus was experiencing before the Jews. A man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. And we hid, as it were, our faces from him. He was despised and esteemed him not. They did not recognize the shepherd. All of the same words that Jesus was talking about as he walked on Solomon's porch, 50 by 30 cubits, and we see in Isaiah 53. Surely he hath borne our griefs and carried our sorrows, yet we did esteem him stricken, smitten of God, and afflicted. Jesus says, I have the power to lose my life and to get it back. But he was wounded for our transgressions. He was bruised for our iniquities. The chastisement of peace was upon him. And with his stripes we are healed. You see, it's talking about the exact same thing. And then here's the clincher. All we like sheep have gone astray. Jesus was talking about the sheep as he walked on Solomon's porch. We have turned everyone to his own way, and the Lord hath laid on him the iniquity of us all. Exactly what Jesus was talking about. He was oppressed and he was afflicted, and yet he opened not his mouth. He is brought as a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before her shearers is dumb, so he openeth not his mouth. He was taken from prison, from judgment, and who shall declare his generation? For he was cut off from the land of the living. For the transgression of my people was he stricken. And he made his grave with the wicked and with the rich in his death, because he had done no violence, neither was any deceit in his mouth. Yet it pleased the Lord to bruise him. He hath put him to grief. When thou shalt make his soul an offering for sin, he shall see his seed. He shall prolong his days, and the pleasure of the Lord shall prosper in his hand. He shall see of the travail of his soul, and shall be satisfied. By his knowledge shall my righteous servant justify many, for he shall bear their iniquities. Therefore will I divide him a portion with the great, and he shall divide the spoil with the strong, because he hath poured out his soul unto death, and he has numbered with the transgressors, and he bare the sin of many, and made intercession for the transgressors. Then came the Jews round about him and said unto him, How long dost thou make us doubt? If thou be the Christ, tell us plainly. Jesus answered them, I told you, and you believe not. The works that I do in my Father's name, they bear witness of me. But you believe not, because you are not of my sheep. We're back in John. We're back in Jesus' words again, directly mirroring Isaiah 53. My sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. And I give unto them eternal life, and they shall never perish. Neither shall any man pluck them out of my hand. My Father which gave them me is greater than all, and no man is able to pluck them out of my Father's hand. I and my Father are one. Then they took up stones against him. Jesus said, many good works have I showed you from my Father. For which of those works do you stone me? They're saying they're stoning him for blasphemy because he is a man making himself God. Now, if you go to a church, you will never, ever, ever, ever see a pastor draw those connections. Why? Because it's numbers. Do we think our God, do we think we as humans can have fully understood the many facets of God to limit him to not putting numbers in the Bible? Of course not. He is amazing, and that proved it. And if the Holy Spirit was in these churches, they would have found this a long time ago. But sadly, the Holy Spirit is not in these churches. And it's not to say that the church is bad or that the people in the church is bad or even the pastors, for they know not what they do. They're following instructions from their corporation. But to really find the truth, you can have a direct connection with God and his Son on your own without ever stepping foot into a church. You simply have to want to find the truth. And only that will set you free, you guys. Only that. Now this gets even more crazy. Let's see here. Close this up. There's the ancient artifact. I'm going to put this in here. These ancient artifacts with the seal of David. I know it goes through different names. I know that there is a little bit of confusion as to what this seal is because it does look like the cube on Saturn. But as I just demonstrated to you, Solomon's temple at the Holy of Holies also had a cube. You can never throw the baby out with the bathwater. You have to break these symbols down, and you have to look at the good and the evil of it. And the evil often reveals the good because you see that the devil is trying to be like the Most High. He's trying to make a counterpart to it. To do what? To confuse you, which is exactly what he's trying to do. He's trying to get you to deny Christ by superimposing his counterfeit version of the truth, overlaying it over the real truth, so that you say, oh, Jesus can't be real because God was in the Holy of Holies, which is a cube, and the cube is evil. The cube is not evil. It's the dark cube that's evil. It's the purple cube that's evil. The purple cube on the North Pole of Saturn. We also know that the New Jerusalem, which is the new heaven that's going to come down in the book of Revelation, is shaped like a cube too. I think that one's made out of pearls or something. It's got pearl gates. All right, let's continue on with this. See what else I have pulled up here. Now, this is where things get interesting, because we are going to look at the story of Solomon, the wisdom of Solomon, before when he was going to cut the baby in half. Let's find that story. Now, many of you remember this Bible story. I grew up as a Jehovah's Witness, so this was like one of the most amazing stories. And I thought it had everything to do with sharing. And the person who wants to share is the person that wins. And you can always find the truth by the person with the bigger heart. And yes, that's part of the story. And let me go over the story because many of you might not know what I'm referencing here. If I could find the story, let's see here. Sorry, guys. Trying to figure this out here. I think it's, oh, here it is. The furnishings of the temple. The heading was called The Wisdom of Solomon. Let's find this real quick, you guys. Ark brought to the temple. No. Solomon's prayer of dedication. No, it's back. It's back. Dedication of the temple. No, it's before this. So what is the story? All right, let's take a look at this story, you guys, because this is way different than the version that we've been given, okay? Now, let's get into this. Solomon made a treaty with Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. Now, just to give you a little background behind this. This is after the Exodus of the Israelites, which were the forefathers of Solomon. This was after the Exodus, in which God delivered the Israelites from Pharaoh. And we had the 10 plagues and all that stuff, right? Moses parted the Red Sea. So, these were the two seeds. The exodus of God's pure seed, from which Solomon would come, and Jesus and everybody else after that, versus the Egyptians, which were, I believe, the Nephilim seed. They were dividing the seed out, right? So why would Solomon make a treaty with Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and marry Pharaoh's daughter and bring her to the city of David? Why would he remix the seed? Actually, he didn't have children. The children that he had from this Pharaoh's daughter were not part of the bloodline of Christ. In other words, Solomon's wife, who was in the bloodline of Christ, was not this woman, because he had many wives. It says here that the people were sacrificing at the high places because no house had yet been built for the name of the Lord. Solomon loved the Lord, walking in the statutes of his father David, though he sacrificed and burned incense at the high places. He went to Gibeon. The Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream at night. He said, "Ask what you want from me." Solomon said, "Wisdom." Or he says, "You have shown great mercy to your servant David, my father, because he walked before you in faithfulness, righteousness, and uprightness of heart toward you. And you have shown him great kindness in giving him a son to sit on his throne this day. Now, Lord, you have made your servant king in place of my father David. And I am still a little child, and I do not know how to go out or come in." This means something. Go out or come in. Well, I don't know yet, but it means something different than what you think it means. "And your servant is in the midst of your people, whom you have chosen, a great people, so numerous they cannot be numbered or counted. Give your servant, therefore, an understanding heart to judge your people." This is what Solomon asked for. "That I may discern between good and bad. For who is able to judge among so great a people?" This is when God gave Solomon his wisdom. He was still serving God. Looks like the only thing he was doing wrong right here was sacrificing and burning incense at the high places, Gibeon being one of them. Now, this is intriguing and fascinating because I looked up places around the world that have these hexagonal columns. They call them basaltic hexagonal features. And they are everywhere. Ireland. Fingal's Cave on the Isle of Staffa, Scotland. Devil's Postpile in California. These are the tree stumps. And there is a hexagon pool in Israel, the Holy Land. And this is it. Now, this sits at about sea level. It isn't a high place in terms of what we would think is a high place, but maybe their high place had a different meaning. Maybe the high place were these conduits to heaven. Maybe that's what these were, the ancient tree stumps. Maybe that's where the fallen angels came down from. Mountains. These are all over the world, you guys. Japan, Vietnam. I'm going to put this link in the description. These are the tree stumps that everyone's been talking about. Put that in here. There you go. Basalt formations around the world. Now, why am I talking about this? Because that's where Solomon would go to sacrifice and burn incense high places, or it could have been the place. I don't know for sure. I'm trying to figure this out just like you guys are. And at this time, God loved Solomon and worked with him, and he had not enraged the Lord yet. Now, why am I setting this up? Because Solomon made a treaty with Pharaoh. Now, then what happened? He asked for wisdom. Let's read the account. At that time, 2 women who were prostitutes came and stood before the king. So this chapter starts with the 2 seeds of good and evil. Jesus' seed marrying Pharaoh's seed. And now there are 2 prostitutes. I believe that the prostitutes represent humanity and the 2 seeds next to each other. A prostitute has children that can have many fathers or different fathers. 2 children in the womb from different fathers, Cain and Abel. It says here, the first woman said, "Oh, my Lord, this woman and I lived in the same house. The house is earth. And I bore a child with her in the house. 3 days after I gave birth, she also had a child, and we were together." Cain and Abel in the womb. One, the father being Satan, and the other, the father being Adam, in the same womb, in the same house. Are you guys starting to see the picture here? There was no one else with us in the house. Only the 2 of us were in the house. The house is the earth or the womb. Then this woman's child died during the night because she rolled over on it. She got up at midnight and took my son from beside me while your servant slept and laid him at her bosom, and then laid her dead child at my bosom. She did the rope-a-dope, switch the child, because she rolled over her child. Who's that? The Nephilim fighting each other. They were cursed to kill all each other in the book of Enoch. That was what was talked about in the book of Enoch. God said, you're in your offspring. Let's look it up. Enoch. Curse of offspring. Offspring of Nephilim. Let's try. It says something about the offspring all battling against each other and killing each other in the book of Enoch. I'll let you guys find that, because otherwise we could be here. This is going to be a very long show. So basically, the offspring killed each other, which is tantamount to the woman rolling over the child, but she's not going to let it go because she wants the other girl's child. I believe that represents the pure child. It says here, the woman, then this woman's child died during the night. She swapped the child. She got up at midnight, took my son from beside me while your servant slept, and laid at her bosom and laid her dead child at my bosom. When I rose in the morning to feed my child, it was dead. But when I looked closely in the morning light, I recognized that it was not my son whom I bore. The other woman said, "No, the living is my son and the dead is your son." And she said, "No, the dead is your son, the living is my son." Thus they spoke before the king. So all this came before Solomon. Solomon had to make a choice. And he said, "This is my son who lives, and your son is dead." And the other says, "No, but my son is dead, and my son is the living." So the king said, "Bring me a sword." And they brought a sword before the king. The king said, "Divide the living child in 2 and give half to one and half to the other." Are you guys starting to see where this is heading? The wheats and the tares. Then the woman whose child was living one spoke to the king, for she yearned with compassion for her son. And she said, "Oh, my lord, give her the living child and do not kill it." In other words, the true mother was willing to give up custody of her child to save its life. And that is what Jesus Christ and God in heaven has done. But we're in a prison of the enemy on this planet. And God has to let the wheats grow up with the tares until the harvest. And only the people who hear his voice will hear it. But most simply won't, because their father is not of the Lord. Their father is of a different father who does not hear the voice of the shepherd. But the other said, let it be neither mine nor yours, and divide it. This is the bad one. This is the tares, willing to let the child die. Willing to let the child die. That's the devil. He wants to take as many of us out with him as possible. Then the king Solomon said, give her the living child and do not slay it. She is the mother. He knew this is the wisdom of Solomon. He was talking about the wheats and the tares. And it says here, all Israel heard of the king's judgment, and they feared the king, for they saw that the wisdom of God was in him to execute sound judgment. And that, you guys, is the wisdom of Solomon.